Hello and welcome. Welcome to today's Consulting Insight. As many of you know, I speak about trust and the importance of trust so often. I talk about it all the time. And a few months ago, I met with somebody. His name is Sher, and he talks about trust as well. He is an executive coach, but he believes trust is so important to helping you get a job and to moving forward. So I thought today maybe it would be great to have a conversation between the two of us about trust. He works with people looking for jobs. Work with consultants. And trust is so important no matter what you do. Hi, I'm Laura Burford, and I help independent consultants build successful consulting businesses by focusing on what matters. So let me introduce Ken. You can see him here, and I'll read a little bit because I can't remember everything off the top of my head. And Ken Sher, as I mentioned, he's an executive coach, he's a speaker, and he's also an author. You know, I like authors. And he wrote a book about trust. And we'll talk more about the book at the end, as well as a PDF that you can get access to that talks about trust and how he thinks about it. Through his experiences, Ken has seen that technical skills alone don't make people successful, and that the most successful people are compassionate, authentic, and know how to build strong, trusted relationships. And I mentioned his book, and he brings those lessons to life in his book. What's trust got to do with it? Transforming leadership, culture, and the job search. So let me introduce Ken and ask him if there's anything I missed. And I'm sure as we speak, he's going to bring out some stories about some of his experiences when he was in the corporate world. And he has a long list of great corporate clients. So, Ken, did I miss anything that you think I should talk about or I should have
No, you
mentioned?
did. No, you did great. I guess the only thing I would say is that, and it's something I want to talk about in terms of developing a coaching or a consulting practice, is that sometimes you have to shift a little bit. So now my focus is really more on executive coaching, leadership coaching, and my keynote speaking. I still can't help myself, and I help people with career transition, finding their next role, because I do love helping people. But that's really where I'm at right now. But thank you. It's a very nice introduction.
Okay, well, you're welcome. So, why don't we dive into this and talk about the topic trust?
Mhm.
What would you, if somebody was struggling and they weren't sure about trust, what would you talk to them about? Why is this a great topic for the two of us to even be talking about?
Yeah, well, Laura, I think I don't think anyone could argue that there is a lack of trust in the world today, whether it's in politics, whether it's religion, whether it's just with your next door neighbor. I think a lot of times people's first instinct is to distrust and to think people are trying to get for themselves. And I think that's created a lot of the issues we have in the country, let alone the world. I also think in business, I just see how employees don't trust employers. And if you don't trust your employer, it's hard to be fully engaged. It's hard to take initiative to want to do things better. And it creates consistent flight risks among employees because without trust, there's also not a whole lot of loyalty either.
Yeah. Yeah, there is no loyalty when you don't have
Yeah.
trust. And,
Hmm.
Um, I talk about frequently, it's the words you use, it's the images you use, and we can go down a path about different images and how some images help build trust and others don't. But it's also how you make people feel. And I think you're right. There is a lot of distrust because if you're working with somebody and you don't feel comfortable,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Mhm.
how would you go about talking to somebody and explaining to them how would they go about building trust? What would you recommend that they do?
Yeah. Well, I would say first, Lord, to the premise of my book, the e-guide we're going to offer people, as well as the my keynote speaking, is that trust is the foundation of great relationships, and great relationships are the key to success. And you can look at your personal life or professional life, the people that you're really close to, the people that you know are there for you and you're there for them. Trust is there. It's got to be there. You think about the opposite, there are people who you're like, I just don't know. There's something about that person. They're holding back, or they're more in it for themselves. I just can't trust them. It's hard to have that great relationship. Um, so I have what I call the trust success model, and it's an acronym. So if I'm working with a client, I talk about the different aspects of trust. The first T being transparency. Sharing all the information you could share with someone so that they could make decisions, whether it's take advantage of opportunities or handle challenges. Whether it's the R, focusing on results, but not only the end result, but how you get there and being clear on what those results are, because that sets expectations and you know what you're shooting for. The understanding, the U of the trust model is about understanding where your people are coming from and where they're going and helping them to get there. In some cases, you might develop someone to the point where they leave your company, go elsewhere, leave the department. And although that's not the ideal, if you're really in it authentically for your people to do the best they can, you'll be happy for them, and that'll continue to bring in great talent for you anyway. The S is about simplicity, just messaging, straightforward, being clear on priorities, and the T is about teams, building teams where everybody's working with each other and recognizes that they're part of something greater than themselves. So I think talking about each of those aspects, typically we find blind spots in leaders that they're not doing one or more of these things, and that creates at least not a trustful environment, let alone a distrustful one.
Yeah. And one of the things I tell people is, you've worked with somebody, you trust the person, they leave.
Hmm.
Guess what? You never know when that person's going to come back in your life.
Right. Hmm.
And if you have a trusted relationship and you need their help with something, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier to
Hmm.
reach out because you're comfortable with one another. So
Hmm.
it's really
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's so right, Laura. I'm sorry to interrupt,
No, go
but I
ahead.
also think that those people that leave are going to be talking about your company, and
Oh,
they may
yeah.
say, you know what? When I left, my boss, she was sorry I was leaving, but that Laura, she was happy for me. She really wanted me to do well. If you're looking for a great place to work, go there. Certainly, the opposite can happen too. So I do think if you really want your people to do well, you shouldn't be upset if they leave. I mean, you're going to be a little upset, but you shouldn't really hold it against them if they leave because you should want what's best for your people.
You're a coach now and you're an executive coach. Do you use this trust model with the people you work with?
Yeah, I do because it's interesting because a lot of times, frankly, it seems like common sense to me and probably people like you as well. Um, but just an example, if someone comes to me and talks about, I have this direct report, they're not doing what they need to do, they're not living up to expectations. And I'll say, well, have you talked to them about that? Have you asked them what is it that's going on? Do they know that you're not happy with their performance? Well, they should know. They know they've been doing this long enough. They should know how to do it. And then we talk about results and what are the results you want from them that you're not getting? And then why haven't you spoken to them and reminded them if you haven't told them in the first place, here's where we need to get to. And if they're not getting there, then you need to coach them and give them feedback and help them to get there. But to just say they're not doing their job without being open and honest with them, then that's going to limit communication. That's going to make that person wonder, why are they always mad at me? Or are they out to get me? Or they don't understand your motives of why you're doing that. So that's one example of where being clear in your communication about results, expectations will, being putting them all on the table, not holding back anything is going to help that person be perform better.
Okay. Let
Uh,
me ask you a question because we're talking about you and executive coaching and how you're helping them. Um, how did you end up moving from what you were doing at places like J&J and Bristol Myers Squibb
Mhm.
to coaching? Because you were doing sales and marketing,
Well,
was what my understanding is.
yes, yeah, I had well, I was at J&J for 25 years. I had a bunch of different sales and marketing leadership roles, and I led sales recruiting for the US for a couple of years, and then I led three different sales training and leadership development teams. And then I was at an operating company where we got a new general manager. And in our first meeting, Laurie, he said to me, I've led two different training and development teams, and you will never live up to my expectations. And that wasn't a great leadership moment. In my head, I'm thinking, we have a leadership development class coming up. You might want to attend that because this is not the way to go about things. So he made my life difficult for a few months. I thought I could turn him around. I couldn't. And ultimately, I found myself laid off at 52 years old with two kids in college and one in high school. And it was a really difficult time for me. And frankly, I share this with people because business is tough sometimes, as you know, and we go through difficult challenges, and there's no shame to ask for help. And I needed help. I went to a therapist, and she helped me get through that time. And I got back on my feet and I landed three new jobs while I was still in my 50s, one of them at Bristol Myers Squibb, where I realized I was done with corporate America. So I thought about my career, and this is something I think all people who are deciding to go out on their own, you need to think about, well, what is it that you've liked to do in the past? What is your passion? What are the things that will keep you going and at the same time help you make a living? And I looked at as a manager, I loved coaching people and helping them to get better. I looked at my time in training development and helping leaders be better and stronger. And I also looked at my own experience, the difficult time of being a mid to late career person, being out of work all of a sudden, not having not looked for work for 25 years. There are a lot of us out there. So I started out as a career coach focusing there, and I get a lot of fulfillment out of that. But frankly, people who are out of work don't want to spend money, and I totally understand that. I was there myself. So I do help people and a lot pay for it, but I also found myself giving a lot of pro bono advice and guidance. So, and this is something where I think consultants need to keep in mind, you've got to have an open mind. You do need to be focused, you do need to have a direction, but you've got to be open to the fact that sometimes things will come your way or sometimes you need to change up. So I did a kind of reset and I thought, well, learning leadership development, I've loved that. I led teams doing that at J&J, which is very known for leadership development. And I shifted my practice to be more heavily weighted towards executive coaching. And that's how I ended up, and I started that in 2015. So for the past 11 years or so, it's been now it's mostly executive coaching, some career coaching, and then keynote speaking.
Okay. Yeah, that's what you talked about dealing with in your 50s. I call, you have to understand you. What matters to you? What's important to you? Whether you go back
Mhm.
into the corporate world or you go out on your own doing something,
Hmm.
that's where you have to start. It's
Yeah.
you got to start
Hmm.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with the benefit of experience, if you take time to be introspective and see what did you really like to do, what were you good at doing, what don't you want to do, and you hopefully can help get that direction more clearly.
Yeah. Now you don't know how many times I work with consultants, people who have decided that they want to start their own consulting business, and they immediately
Hmm.
fall back to what they were doing in the corporate world. But they didn't like
Hmm.
it. They
Yeah.
and they're thinking they're going to start their own business and do something they've done for years. I'm like, guys, that's tough if you're not really
Yeah.
comfortable
Hmm.
with that. And that kind of
Hmm.
dovetails into one of the other things, questions that you and I started to talk about earlier, and that's when you start a business, what surprised you the most about starting the business?
Yeah. Well, there were actually a few things. One of the things that surprised me, and it actually happened more so when I first lost my job, but I think it also happened later on, is sometimes you quickly discover who your friends are and who is not as friendly as you thought. People say, "Oh, I'll be there for you. Yes, I'll help you out, whatever I do." And then you call and you don't get any return calls. So I think you kind of realize who is your support and who is not. And actually, some of it can be surprising. There were a couple of people who reached out to me and really offered help and support that I never expected. And there were some people that really disappointed me that I thought would help. The next thing I would say is that coming from a corporate environment where I had assistants, I had direct reports, I had resources. I didn't have to, build my own PowerPoint presentations necessarily or do my own mailings or things like that. You find you have to roll up your sleeves and learn a lot of things that I didn't have to do in the past. So there certainly were a lot of aspects of that. Um, Figuring out the other thing that is interesting is how many people have approached me through LinkedIn in particular about how they can help me get 50 clients a month or 300 meetings a quarter, some ridiculous things. And initially they all sound great. And then you realize, you got to really be careful about those things and figuring out where to invest your money because you don't, especially starting out, have unlimited funds. You need to be smart how you invest it. So there really are a lot of aspects. And then that last one is, again, like I said earlier, is to be somewhat flexible. Yes, you have to have a plan. Yes, you have to be focused. But you also have to have your eyes open and realize that there are some things that may happen that you didn't expect that could be a benefit to.
Yeah. And I think your first point there was you mentioned, and I know it's happened to me, and I've watched it happen to many people, and they're surprised with people that you thought would help you. And you reach out, they
Hmm.
kind of don't. You
Yeah.
get crickets, maybe. But
Hmm.
some of that ties back to to what we started this conversation about, and it's trust.
Yes.
The
Hmm.
better
Yeah.
your relationships are, the better you build trusted relationships. They're the
Hmm.
people that stay
Yeah.
with you. And
Yes. Hmm.
and I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to add to that, but
Yeah, I do a bit. Part of it would be if I try not to have regrets, but there are things you look back on I could have done differently or better. And one of them is I saw the writing on the wall at J&J, and then I could feel at Bristol Myers I wasn't going to be there long. I needed to move on. I regret a little bit not kind of setting myself up before I left, before my regular paychecks stopped. Um, and by that, I mean reaching out to people, letting them know what I was thinking, getting input, asking for, follow-ups once I do leave. Maybe even taking information, not proprietary information, but things that would help me moving forward. So one bit of advice I would have to people is to build those relationships as you described, but also try to set yourself up as best you can for when you leave that environment. Do it ethically, like I say, don't take not proprietary information, but take things that you think will be helpful for you as you start your business.
yeah, you know, I keep a journal,
Hmm.
and I was surprised when I went out on my own. I went out thanks to 9/11. I opted to not take another position. Um,
Hmm.
but just my journal had tons of notes in it.
Mm. Yeah.
And it might sound strange, but I would go through, oh, I did this. Oh, here was the
Hmm.
cause of this. So many of those
Mm.
notes helped as I went forward. And
Yeah.
something you never think about.
No, but that is a great habit to have because you're right. You think you're going to remember it at the time. An analogy I always give, I have three kids, two boys, and I look at the baby pictures and I would look with my mother and say, you really should write the names on the back of these pictures. And I say, Mom, they're my kids. Of course I'm going to remember. Well, years later, I look back and I'm like, well, which one is this and which one is that? If I can't remember my own kids, I'm not going to remember some project that I did 10 years ago in detail. So what you're doing, I think, is a great practice.
But it was just a fluke. I'm calling it a fluke
Mhm.
because I had never thought about it. And it
Mm.
was just one day I was going through, and the number of stories and the things I could leverage was in those
Mm.
journals.
Yeah,
Sounds
that's
strange.
great. Mm.
Something you
Yeah.
might want to pass on to some of your executives.
I
people.
will. I'll pass credit. I'll give credit to you on that one, then,
Oh, you
Laura.
don't even have to, but yeah, you can pass it along. Uh, Getting back to trust for a couple seconds, are there anything that you picked up from J&J or Bristol Myers Squibb that you saw trust positively or negatively in those two environments? I have lots. I
Yeah,
gave one earlier, but I,
yeah. I actually could give one on each side.
okay.
First of all, while I was at Johnson and Johnson, over the years, what I learned was that one of the most important values to the company was trust. And I learned that, I guess I was somewhat indoctrinated or brainwashed even, but as I said to my wife once when an early meeting I went to and I was all pumped up about it, and she said, you're being brainwashed. I said, yes, but it's great. It's all good things. It's for good reasons. But one of the things Johnson Johnson has is what they call our credo. And it's a one-page, four-paragraph document. And each paragraph talks about the responsibility to the various stakeholders of J&J. So the first
Mm,
paragraph's the responsibility to consumers and the healthcare workers, and giving them safe products at a fair price. The second paragraph is a responsibility to employees, giving them a fair wage and a safe place to work. The third paragraph is about the responsibility to the communities and taking care of the environment and giving back when you can. And the fourth paragraph is about the responsibility to shareholders, to stockholders. And what fascinated me about that is that it was written by General Robert Wood Johnson, who at the time was the only stockholder in the company. But he put all three of the other stakeholders ahead of him with the belief that if he built the relationships with them, that it would take care of the business. And for over 90 years, J&J has paid quarterly dividends to all stockholders. So he was onto something there. And some people say, yeah, that's a nice document. I bet it looks great in the corporate office, and it does, but they really use it. And just a quick example was in the early 80s, you may recall there was the Tylenol scare with some
yes.
crazy person took the capsules in Tylenol and replaced the acetaminophen with cyanide, and six people got killed, died from it. One was a 12-year-old girl. Four people from one family died. And when the health inspector went in to figure out what happened, they did find a bottle of Tylenol in this one family's house. And when she smelled it, she smelled like an almond-like scent. So she knew something was wrong. And the receipt was right there. And six tablets were missing that this family had taken. And they found out it was poisoned. So J&J had a bunch of things they could do. They could launch a public relations campaign. Everybody, don't worry, it's safe. Millions of people have used Tylenol, keep using it. They could have launched an advertising campaign to the healthcare workers with all the data and statistics and safety and efficacy. Um, or they could have just let it go and waited for the next news cycle to take it off the front pages. But they didn't. They decided we are the mother and baby company at that time, especially, right? We have
Mm,
Johnson baby powder, baby shampoo, Band-Aids. They developed a really close, trusting relationship with their consumers, and they didn't want to put that at risk. So they decided they did launch a public relations campaign after they pulled Tylenol from the shelves, and the campaign said, don't take any more Tylenol. If you have any of it, return it, and we'll put it back on the shelf when we know it's safe, when we figure out what happened. A few months later, they put Tylenol back on the shelf, and it quickly became the number one over-the-counter pain reliever again. And the reason for that, to me, is very clear. It's because they never lost the trust they had built with their consumers. The consumers knew that they weren't putting profit ahead of consumer safety. Now, J&J's had issues. They're not perfect. I recognize that, but it's not for lack of trying. They really use that credo to guide them. And I think that credo is based on building trust with all of their key stakeholders. And that's why I developed that trust success model that I mentioned earlier. Um,
okay.
just
Yeah.
very quickly, the flip side of that, when I was at Bristol Myers, um, there was no trust between sales and marketing, between training and development and sales. And an example was one time I wanted to go out in the field with a rep just to see what's going on so we can make sure our training is focused on what they need. And the rep said, no, I don't want you coming out with me. And I thought, well, that's strange. So I called the national sales manager. I said, I just want to go out and see what's happening and observe. and the rep doesn't want me. And she said, well, if she doesn't want you, then you can't go. And I thought, wow, that's kind of odd that the reps don't trust me to come out with them, and she doesn't trust me to be in the field with her reps. To me, that's a very difficult way to be successful when you just don't have that relationship.
Yeah. I like the fact too that the J&J is something that has stood the test of time. It's been there, what, 90 years, you said?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It really hasn't changed. Kind of reminds me of Ford. They haven't really changed their motto. And I have a whole list of others that the
Mhm.
well-known companies that they haven't changed their original founders' beliefs, motto, how they were going to go about building trust, and trust is still there today.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
important. Yeah. Yeah.
It truly is. Mhm.
So, and this I think is a great time for, since you've brought it up, let me, bear with me one second. There. Did I do that right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Why don't you
Nice.
go ahead and talk about your book and talk about the
Okay.
PDF, and then we'll kind of wrap it up a little bit. How's that?
That sounds great. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. So, again, very quickly, trust is an acronym. So, transparency to me is about sharing information as much as you can so people can make good decisions. Results, again, is about setting proper expectations. Understanding is about understanding where someone's coming from, where they want to get to, and helping them to get there. Simplicity is about simple messaging and prioritizations, and teams is about just building that team where everyone's working together. The two things you see here that on the right is an e-guide that I would be very happy to share with anybody who's interested. All you need to do is email me at ken@shercoaching.com. And it's really a high-level overview of the trust success model and how it pertains to leadership and culture in the job search. And then the book itself on the left is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Goodreads and I suppose other places as well. And it's a much more in-depth look at the trust success model. First, about how it can improve leadership. The next section is about culture. The last section about job search. And I take each letter and show how you can develop your skills, your leadership skills, your job search skills through that. And then at the end of each section is a suggested thing for someone to do, an activity to help them advance their development that way. So the model, the guide on the right, is free. Happy to send it to you. Email me at ken@shercoaching.com. The book is a much more in-depth look at it and really some practical things you can do to build trust, build those relationships that will help you be successful.
And by the way, I did go through your PDF, the trust
Mhm.
success model, and that works for anybody. I don't care
Yeah,
where
thank
you
you.
are in your career, it works for anybody. So
Mhm.
there's some
Thank you.
great things in there. So
I
thank you.
appreciate you saying that. Mm.
So reach out to Ken if you want that information. And before I flip off of this screen and provide some other information about Ken, is there one thing you would want somebody to walk away with today? If there was just one fact, one thing, what would that be?
That would be to be your authentic self
Okay.
and be willing to take a chance to show that to other people to to build trust that way. When people see someone who's authentic, whether it's something great that they just did, or even I don't know how to do that, or I could use help with that or support, it shows there's a vulnerability to that, but it really is the start of building trust. So be authentic. Okay, two things. Be authentic and be vulnerable, and that'll help you build those trusting relationships.
Great. Thank you. For everybody that's listening, I will put this information, the book and the trust success model document. I'll put that information in the description because this will be out on YouTube. So you'll find it down below or wherever in the description area. But I also will put some additional information about Ken. Maybe There we go. Ken, there as well. His email, you can connect with him on LinkedIn, Facebook, his website. He has two websites. I think he's very easy to find. All I did was go to put his name in and he popped up on LinkedIn, and then I was able to get to everything else of his. I always check things out. So you can easily find that information. And with that, as you know, my name is Laura Burford, and I am known for the Consultant's Guide. But if you are an independent consultant and you are looking to build your own business, consider, or you have your own business and you want to expand it and you want to grow it, consider downloading the Independent Consultant's Blueprint. It's free. It talks about 5 pillars. Does also talk a little bit about trust, but go ahead and help yourself to the document. It's 14, 15 pages. And with that, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for joining Ken and our discussion about trust. Take care and see
Thank,
you again
thanks
soon.
again for having me, Lauren.
You're welcome.